The ocean is a hostile environment. We often forget this because we stand on the beach and watch the waves roll in, or we sail across the surface in massive steel ships that make us feel invincible. But the moment you break the surface and begin to descend, you are entering a world that fundamentally does not want you there. It is not just the lack of oxygen, or the freezing temperatures, or the predators that patrol the dark water. It is the weight, the sheer crushing weight of the water itself. For every 10 meters you descend, the ocean adds another atmosphere of pressure, another 14.7 pounds per square inch pressing against every single inch of your body. To work in this environment, specifically in the oil and gas industry, humanity had to invent a way to cheat physics. We created saturation diving. It is widely considered the most dangerous job on the planet. More dangerous than being an astronaut, more dangerous than being a frontline soldier. It involves taking human beings and pressurizing them like soda cans so they can live and work at the bottom of the sea for weeks at a time. When it works, it is a marvel of engineering. But when it fails, physics takes its payment in the most horrific way imaginable. There is no mercy in differential pressure. There is no time to react, no time to bargain, and no time to scream. In 1983, on a drilling rig in the North Sea, 4 men learned that the difference between life and a death so violent it defies description is simply a matter of a single loose clamp and a fraction of a second. This is the story of the Byford Dolphin accident, an event that changed the history of diving forever and remains the darkest chapter in the pursuit of black gold. To understand the nightmare that unfolded on November 5, 1983, we must first understand the machine. The Byford Dolphin was a semi-submersible drilling rig, a massive city of steel and iron floating in the Norwegian sector of the North Sea in the early 80s. The North Sea was the Wild West of the oil industry. The boom was on. Money was flowing like water, and the demand for oil pushed companies to drill deeper, faster, and harder than ever before. The pace was frantic. Regulations were often seen as suggestions rather than laws, and the men who worked the rigs were known for their toughness and their willingness to push the limits. Among the crew were the saturation divers. These were the elite, the astronauts of the ocean. Their job was to maintain the wellheads and pipes sitting on the sea floor, hundreds of feet below the waves. Saturation diving is based on a terrifyingly simple concept. If a diver goes down to the bottom, works for an hour, and comes back up, he has to spend hours or even days decompressing to avoid the benzo condition where nitrogen bubbles form in the blood and can kill you. To avoid this wasted time, oil companies realized they could just keep the divers under pressure. They would put the divers in a pressurized living chamber on the deck of the ship, pump it full of helium and oxygen until the pressure inside matched the pressure at the bottom of the sea. The divers would live in this tank, pressurized to 9 atmospheres absolute. When it was time to work, they would crawl into a transfer capsule, a diving bell, which was also pressurized. The bell would be lowered into the ocean. The divers would swim out, do their job, swim back in, and be hoisted back up to the ship. They would never decompress. They would stay saturated with gas for 28 days straight. For the divers aboard the Byford Dolphin, life was a strange, squeaky-voiced existence. Because they breathed a mixture of helium and oxygen called heliox, their voices were distorted into a cartoonish pitch. It sounds funny to an outsider, but to the men inside it was just another sign that they were no longer living in the human world. They were biological components in a high-pressure machine. The living chambers were cramped, hot, and humid. Condensation dripped from the steel walls. The air was thick. The only thing separating them from the normal atmospheric pressure of the outside world, a pressure that would kill them instantly if they were exposed to it, was a series of steel doors and heavy brass clamps. On that Saturday morning in November, the rig was drilling in the Frigg gas field. It was 4 a.m., the graveyard shift. 2 British divers, Edwin Coward and Roy Lucas, were resting in chamber number 2. 2 Norwegian divers, Bjorn Bergersen and Charles Hellebekk, were returning from a shift. They had just spent hours working in the freezing darkness of the North Sea and were being hoisted back up in the diving bell. The operation was routine. They had done it 100 times before. The bell broke the surface of the water, descended through the moon pool. The opening in the center of the rig was locked onto the mating flange of the living chambers. This is the most critical moment in saturation diving. You have to pressurized vessels, the living chamber, where the divers sleep, and the diving bell, which has just come from the ocean. Both are pressurized to 9 atmospheres. Outside, on the deck of the rig, the pressure is 1 atmosphere. If the seal between the chamber and the bell is broken while the doors are open, the pressure inside will try to equalize with the pressure outside instantly. The force of that equalization is like a bomb going off. Helping the divers that morning were 2 dive tenders, William Craymond and Martin Saunders. Their job was to operate the clamps and the mechanism that connected the bell to the chamber. It was a loud, noisy environment. The wind of the North Sea was howling, the machinery of the rig was grinding, and communication was difficult. Inside the bell, Bergersen and Hellebekk were tired. They wanted to get out of their wet gear, get a shower, and sleep. They docked the bell. The tenders on the outside secured the clamp. The divers equalized the pressure between the tunnel and the chamber. The heavy steel doors swung open. Bergersen and Hellebekk crawled from the bell into the tunnel that connected it to the living quarters. They were greeted by Coward and Lucas, who were already in the chamber. The 4 men were now all in the system. The procedure was simple. Close the door between the tunnel and the chamber. Then the tenders outside would release the pressure in the tunnel, disconnect the bell and send it back down or park it. But something went wrong. A miscommunication, a tired mind, a mechanical failure. We may never know the exact sequence of thoughts that led to the action, but we know the result. Troels Hellevik, the Norwegian diver, was the last one in the line. He was standing in the tunnel area, close to the door separating the chamber from the bell. The door was open. The heavy clamp that held the diving bell to the chamber was supposed to be locked tight until the tunnel was depressurized and the inner doors were sealed. But outside, on the cold, wet deck, the clamp was opened. It wasn't supposed to be possible. There were safety mechanisms. There were protocols. But in 1983, the systems were not fail-safe. William Crammond, the experienced tender, released the clamp before the inner door was closed. In the world of physics, nature abhors a vacuum, but nature also abhors a pressure gradient. When the clamp was released, the seal between the diving bell and the living chamber broke. Inside the chamber, the pressure was 9 atmospheres. Outside, it was 1. The difference was 8 atmospheres. To put that in perspective, the pressure inside a car tire is about 2 atmospheres. The pressure inside that chamber was massive. The air inside the chamber didn't just leak out. It exploded out. It is called explosive decompression. The gas inside the chamber expanded instantly to fill the void of the lower pressure outside. The force was catastrophic. The heavy diving bell, which weighed tons, was blasted away from the mating flange like a bullet from a gun. The 2 tenders standing outside, Crammond and Saunders, were hit by the blast wave of escaping gas and the massive steel bell itself. William Crammond was killed instantly, his body thrown across the deck. Martin Saunders was critically injured, clinging to life. But inside the chamber, the horror was something that medical science had effectively never seen before. The 4 divers Edwin Coward, Roy Lucas Bjorn Bergeson, and Troels Hellevik were subjected to a physical trauma that is difficult to comprehend. We often think of death as a process. Even in a car crash or a shooting, there is a moment of injury, a moment of shock, a biological process of shutting down. Here, there was no process. Physics moved faster than biology. The pressure dropped from 9 atmospheres to 1 atmosphere in a fraction of a second. The air inside their lungs, their sinuses, and their digestive tracts expanded instantly. The gas dissolved in their blood, the helium and oxygen came out of solution all at once. Imagine shaking a soda bottle for an hour and then blowing the cap off with dynamite. That is what happened to the blood in their veins. 3 of the divers, Coward, Lucas, and Bergeson, were inside the main living compartment. They died instantly. The autopsy reports, which were kept classified and sensitive for years, detailed that the gas in their bodies expanded so violently that it essentially cooked their blood. Massive amounts of fat embolisms were found in their arteries. The soft tissues of their bodies were ravaged by the gas expansion. It was not a peaceful death, but it was a fast one. Their brains likely did not have enough time to register the pain before the massive trauma caused immediate cessation of life. They were found in positions that suggested they had no idea what was coming. One moment they were standing or sitting, safe in their habitat, and the next, the universe turned inside out. However, the fate of the 4th diver, Troels Hellevik, was different, and it is his story that serves as the grim reminder of the power of the deep. Hellevik was standing in the tunnel, right next to the door that connected the chamber to the bell. He was partially blocking the opening. When the clamp released and the bell flew off, the pressure differential created a vacuum effect through the small opening of the slightly ajar door. The force was calculable, but unimaginable. The escaping gas rushed through the opening, creating a wind speed that shattered the sound barrier. Hellevik was pulled toward the opening. The opening was a heavy steel crescent door, jam-packed with brass mechanics. It was not a wide opening. It was barely large enough for a man to crawl through carefully. The pressure differential forced his body through a gap that was too small to accommodate it. The descriptions from the official investigation are clinical, cold, and horrifying. They state that the diver was forced through the crescent-shaped opening of the partially opened hatch. The violence of this event resulted in the instantaneous fragmentation of his body. The physics were so extreme that parts of his remains were found on the rig deck, fully outside the chamber, while other parts remained inside. It was a level of destruction usually reserved for victims of high-speed aviation disasters or massive explosions. But there was no fire. There was no bomb, just air. Just the air we breathe, compressed and then released. The investigation that followed was messy, painful, and for a long time, unjust. The oil company and the rig operators immediately looked for someone to blame. They pointed the finger at the dead tender, William Crammond. They claimed it was human error. They said he opened the clamp too early, that he ignored protocol. It is the oldest play in the corporate handbook, blame the dead guy who couldn't defend himself. For decades, the families of the divers had to live with the official narrative that their loved ones died because of a mistake by a colleague. But the diving community knew better. They knew that the equipment on the Byford Dolphin was outdated even for 1983. They knew that the safety protocols were non-existent. There were no interlocks. An interlock is a simple mechanism that prevents you from opening the clamp if there is still pressure inside the tunnel. It is a safe, cheap, simple piece of engineering that would have made it physically impossible for crewmen to open that clamp while the divers were in danger. The rig didn't have them, the company hadn't installed them. It took 26 years for the truth to be officially recognized. It wasn't until 2008, after years of legal battles and investigations by the North Sea Divers Alliance, that the Norwegian government finally admitted that the equipment was at fault. The accident wasn't caused by a rogue employee. It was caused by a system that prioritized speed and profit over safety. The lack of proper safety mechanisms was the smoking gun. The divers didn't die because of a mistake. They died because it was cheaper to run the rig without the interlocks than to shut down and install them. The families eventually received compensation, but no amount of money can erase the images of that day. The Byford Dolphin incident remains a case study in engineering ethics. It is taught in universities. It is discussed in safety briefings on every rig around the world. But for the men and women who work the offshore industry, it is more than a lesson. It is a ghost story. When you look at photos of the Byford Dolphin rig, it looks like just another piece of industrial machinery floating in the grey waters of the North Sea. It looks strong. It looks stable. But inside the steel structure, the ghosts of 5 men remain. The incident forced a complete overhaul of saturation diving regulations. Today, electronic interlocks, sensors, and redundant safety checks are mandatory. You cannot open a bell clamp under pressure today without overriding multiple computer systems and alarms. The blood of the Byford Dolphin crew wrote the safety manuals that keep modern divers alive. But the horror of the event lies in the fragility of the human body against the forces we try to tame. We build machines to conquer the ocean, to drill miles into the crust of the earth, to live in environments where biology says we should perish, and most of the time, our machines work. Most of the time, the steel holds. But the Byford Dolphin is a reminder that the margin for error is zero. Imagine the perspective of the tenders on the deck, the noise of the wind, the cold spray of the sea, the routine of the shift, and then a sound louder than a jet engine as the gas escaped. The sight of a multi-ton diving bell flying through the air. The realization that the men inside, your friends, the men you were just talking to over the comms, are gone. Not just dead, but erased. And for the divers inside, there was likely no fear. That is the only small mercy in this story. The speed of the event outpaced the speed of the human nervous system. They did not drown, they did not suffocate. They simply ceased to exist as biological entities and became physics equations. One moment they were tired men looking forward to a shower and a meal. The next, they were gone. The legacy of the Byford Dolphin is written in the codes and standards of the North Sea. It is a legacy of caution, but it also serves as a stark warning about the hubris of industry. When we push into the unknown, whether it is outer space or the deep ocean, we are entering domains where the rules of survival are dictated by the fundamental laws of the universe. Gravity, pressure, temperature, these are not negotiable. You cannot bribe physics. You cannot reason with a pressure gradient. Today, saturation diving is safer, but it is never safe. Every time a diver climbs into a bell and is lowered through the moon pool, they are placing their lives in the hands of the tenders, the supervisors, and the engineers who designed the clamps. They are trusting that the seal will hold. They are trusting that the interlocks will work. They are trusting that the lesson of November 5, 1983 has not been forgotten. Deep-sea horror is often associated with monsters. We fear the giant squid, the megalodon, the unknown creature lurking in the trench. But the true horror of the abyss isn't biological. It's physical. It's the pressure. It's the fact that we are soft, water-filled sacks of carbon trying to exist in a world designed to crush us. The Byford Dolphin accident didn't involve a monster. There was no creature attacking the rig. There was just air. The same air that fills a child's balloon. The same air that we breathe in and out every few seconds without thinking. But under pressure, that air becomes a loaded weapon. And on that freezing night in the North Sea, the trigger was pulled, leaving behind a scene so nightmarish that it forced humanity to rethink its relationship with the deep. So the next time you see footage of an astronaut floating in space, or a diver working on a pipe in the gloom of the ocean floor, remember the Byford Dolphin. Remember that the only thing separating them from oblivion is a seal, a clamp, and a few millimeters of steel. And remember that, in the battle between human engineering and the forces of nature, nature always has the potential to win in the blink of an eye. The ocean is patient. The pressure is always there, waiting for a mistake, waiting for a loose clamp, waiting to reclaim the space we have tried to carve out for ourselves in the dark.